Hope everybody's doing well. We'll call the meeting to order. We need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have all the minutes. So I guess we could go through each one, or we could have a motion to approve. What are there? 3 sets of minutes.
Yes.
The regular meeting from February 14th, March 12th, and then the special meeting on March 12th and April 22nd. So can I have a motion for all those?
So moved.
Second.
And
Any changes or, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then we have a meeting schedule, which Dan sent out yesterday. And there is, what date is there that is an issue, Dan?
One of the trustees has told me that the September 18 meeting is a conflict on his schedule. And I was wondering if we can do this after the meeting, but if we could move that meeting to the 25th, the individual that has the conflict, that wouldn't be a conflict on that date. And if everybody else is okay, we can move the meeting to the 25th. So what I'd ask is maybe that there's a motion to accept the schedule with the proviso that if everybody lets me know that the 25th is good, that we finalize the schedule with the September meeting being on the 25th rather than the 18th.
So Dan, this is Christine. I potentially have a conflict on the 25th, but I think we should go ahead and do it.
Okay. Thank you,
And we'll
Christine.
just see. You know, right now, honestly, I was supposed to be in New York that week. Who knows if that's going to happen?
Right.
So,
Okay.
So the motion would be then to approve the schedule. Do you want to try to change? Has anybody else got a conflict on the 25th? Okay, why don't we change the 18th meeting to the 25th, and then we need a motion to approve the schedule.
I move we approve the schedule with the change of the September meeting to the 25th.
Is there a second?
second.
Okay,
Maya, that was you.
that was you, Maya?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Okay. Group reports, the Student Senate report.
Yes. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So good morning. It's so wonderful to see all of your faces. I hope you're all safe and healthy. I just have a quick update about our Student Senate. So we held elections in April and we elected all new student representatives, the student body did, and that means we have a new student trustee. She is in attendance this morning as a participant, and her name is Alexis McCowan. She's a rising senior undergraduate at UNC, and she'll be your new student trustee. She previously served in Student Senate as the director for campus relations. Also, I wanted to quickly express my thanks for 3 really exceptional years for working with the board and all of our university administrators. I started my sophomore year when I was appointed to be a student representative on the search committee that hired Andy. And the experience I had was really exceptional, and it inspired me to run for trustee for 2 years in a row. And I was elected to serve the student body. I just wanted to say thank you for making me feel welcomed and valued for my contributions, and go Bears.
Well, thank you, Malika. She had sent me an email earlier about and introduced me to 3 different people. And we welcome them on board and good luck. And as I told them that they had big shoes to fill, and you've been an absolute pleasure. And as I said in the email, we've had some great student trustees, but you are definitely at the top of the list. So thank you for everything. Good luck in your future. I know it's going to be great, and we will dearly miss you. So take care.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Faculty report.
The Faculty Senate also elected new officers in April. And beginning July 1st, the new chair of the Faculty Senate is Oscar Levin, an associate professor in the School of Mathematical Sciences. He received his BA, in fact, from UNC in both math and philosophy before he earned his doctorate in mathematical logic from the University of Connecticut. His research specialty is computable structure theory, including connections to graph theory and reverse mathematics. And he has an open source textbook in discrete mathematics, which has been used at over 75 institutions around the world. And I'm sure Oscar will do a great job.
Okay. Well, thank you. And is he on too?
I'll let Dan Satriana answer that question.
You're
Dan,
muted. You're muted, Dan.
Sorry, I believe he is. We have a large number of participants, so I'm looking for Oscar.
I don't see it.
He raised his hand, Dan. He's on.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stan. We appreciate your service as well. I think this is what, second or third time around?
It's my second time and each time for 2 years.
Oh, okay. Well, that made it seem like 3, right?
Yeah, so.
Well, thank you. We appreciate all you've done. Okay, Andy, President's report.
Well, good morning, everybody. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start by beginning my report and also recognizing and thanking Malika Michelle Fuller and Dr. Stan Luger for their service as they end their respective terms as student trustee and chair of the Faculty Senate. Malika has been an exceptional trustee, and I've been exceptionally proud of her during her term as a student trustee. And occasionally there are students who we don't want them to leave because they've contributed so much to the university. And yet in these bittersweet moments, you want to encourage them to move along because we know they're going to go on to do just such great things in the wide world. And the university is going to be left much better because of that. Malika just graduated in May with a Bachelor's of Arts in English and minors in sociology and political science. And she also had the distinction of being honored as a McNair Scholar. And she has spent the last several months interning for Senator Dominic Moreno of Commerce City at the state capitol. And I can't imagine what that's been like in Denver, in the state capitol in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure it's been very demanding and challenging. And now she's preparing to begin graduate school in August in the Master of Public Administration program at The Ohio State University. She was accepted in an interesting program. It's the MPA DC track, which means that she will spend her first year in Columbus and her second year in the nation's capital, serving an internship and completing her coursework. I've been told that she's going to take it easy this summer, although I doubt that, after an unusual and chaotic final semester as an undergraduate. And I understand lots of leisure reading, outdoor pursuits, and time with family await her this summer before she leaves for Columbus. And I remember when I first met her, we talked about her reading list and how extensive it was over the summer. So I'm sure she has another quite extensive reading list as well. So Maleka, we're going to miss you. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss your wisdom, your poise, and your love for your alma mater and fellow students. And I do remember you were one of the first students that I met in the interview process. And I just want to thank you again for all of your service. Thank you for everything on behalf of the University of Northern Colorado. Second, I want to talk about Stan Luger, who's been a personal friend, a close advisor, and a confidant in these first 2 years of my presidency. And I'm very grateful for his wisdom and his insights. Stan came to the University of Northern Colorado 30 years ago after teaching for a time at Russell Sage College in New York. And he's contributed to the university in more service roles than I have time to list this morning, but has notably served a combined 21 of his 30 years at this university as a member of the Senate. He's a professor and chair of the Department of Political Science and International Affairs. His areas of interest are political economy, business government relations, political policy, and environmental politics. His teaching has been recognized with numerous awards, including at least 7 Mortarboard Teaching Awards by my count, the Favorite Professor Lunch Guest, and Delta Zeta's Outstanding Professor Award. His book, Corporate Power, American Democracy and the Automobile Industry, won the Michael Harrington Award bestowed by the American Political Science Association's organized section, New Political Science, for the best book, published in 2000. And although he's stepping down his chair, Stan still has 1 more year on the Faculty Senate, and we look forward to another year of his service to our university's shared governance. And as you heard, he'll be succeeded on July 1 by Dr. Oscar Levin. On a personal note, Stan, for the last several weeks, has been mentoring me on the fine art of sourdough bread baking. And I'm grateful to be his mentee, and he's truly a fantastic baker. So Stan, I want to thank you for your service, for our relationship, our friendship, and I'm so glad and privileged to know you and grateful for all of your contributions to the University of Northern Colorado. So I want to thank both of these outstanding members of our Board of Trustees for their service over the last several years. So on to my president's report. We've had, to say the least, a very challenging spring semester at UNC, and it's also been a pretty challenging start to the summer as well. We began the semester by continuing our work to put the university on a more sustainable financial footing. We had tough conversations about consolidating functions in administrative service centers to transition from a structure that relied heavily on generalists to complete a wide range of tasks to specialists trained and equipped to handle a set of discrete tasks. We also created new student support positions in the colleges to ensure our students have better access to professionals who can help them navigate the college experience. This consolidation of positions across the university into administrative service centers, as well as reductions in housing and dining to match decreased demand, resulted in layoffs of 52 staff. And this was very challenging work. We had lots of discussions, tough discussions, with our campus community. And I appreciate the board taking time for public comment last time you were here on campus back in February. And we continued this work even as operations shifted with stay-at-home orders. And we implemented the plans in late March through April and have filled all of the administrative service centers and student support positions. So the semester really came to be dominated in so many ways by our response efforts to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I could never have imagined the impact the pandemic would have had on our operations and its duration. And I want to commend and continue to commend the entire university community, our faculty, students, staff, and my leadership team for coming together to ensure we could continue to deliver our academic mission through alternate modes of instruction and to make that transition really happen in a matter of days. Our offer to access vital support services like counseling and advising, providing student engagement opportunities while most of our students were away from campus, deliver timely information and important updates to our community through regular email communications, daily and now weekly status operation update videos. We have a robust coronavirus website with an FAQ, a coronavirus hotline, and a student feedback forum that allows students to answer specific questions and concerns. And I've also conducted frequent office hours and small forums with groups of students, faculty, and staff to stay connected and address issues with what's on their minds. I know that we did not always pull this off flawlessly. Certainly mistakes were made, but what we were able to do together in just a short period of time is truly remarkable. And I hope that all of you will thank me and thank our students, faculty, and staff for their patience and hard work that they've made over the last couple of months. Something else that happened that we discussed is we had to postpone commencement in May. And it was certainly heartbreaking, but necessary to protect the health and safety of our students and their families, our staff, and our faculty. We spent time collecting student input through a variety of means and made the decision to hold our spring commencement ceremonies in December. And we'll have a completely separate set of ceremonies from fall commencement. And hopefully we'll be able to do that. It certainly depends on social distancing restrictions later in the fall semester. We released several special messages congratulating our graduates in May, and colleges and departments also had various celebrations. And I'm so very proud of our resilient class of 2020 and look forward to welcoming them back onto campus in December. The pandemic and our necessary efforts to respond, but also pause on important activity underway in the spring, such as our strategic planning work and other things, are going to start back up again in the fall. Before the end of the spring semester, we also began the tough work of planning for a return this fall semester, or re-entry. And we have maintained communications with the UNC community, as well as admitted new and transfer students. And we've released another update on our plans for the fall earlier this week. And I've been hosting almost weekly events with families and students to talk about what the fall is going to look like. And I still remain very optimistic that we will be back in the fall offering most of our courses in person. But surely it won't be like most fall semesters, but our team of faculty, staff, and students from across the university are working very hard to make sure our students have a rich academic and extracurricular experience on campus in the coming academic year. And you'll hear more about this, but Provost Mark Anderson and Vice President Katrina Rodriguez are leading our efforts to prepare for the fall as co-chairs of a re-entry task force. And Associate Vice President Blaine Nickerson is heading up the immense logistical work needed to make this possible. And Mark and Katrina will talk a little bit more about that later in the meeting today. I also feel confident that we will have a full athletic season, including football, soccer, and volleyball. And I'm waiting to see what the NCAA guidance will look like for the fall. Our student athletes in our fall sports will actually resume workouts beginning on Monday. The weight room and our recreation center will be used for individual workouts with our trainers, up to 10 athletes at a time. There'll be outdoor workouts for up to 25, but no formal practice is allowed yet. In fact, coaches are not allowed to participate in the workouts that are beginning now. We are certainly in uncharted territory, but I'm proud of the work we're doing to get ready, and again, want to thank everyone who's involved with this effort. So we're going to spend most of today's meeting discussing the fiscal year 21 budget, the economic impacts of COVID-19, and how they've significantly impacted our revenues. And we have a lot of work to do to balance our revenues and expenses. In addition to the fall re-entry task force that I mentioned earlier, I also created a financial task force, which I'm co-chairing with our CFO, Michelle Quinn. Now, this task force has met several times this summer, and we recently divided the group into two subcommittees. Our prioritization subcommittee is conducting a vertical review of our campus, and the heads of each division, as well as information management and technology and athletics, are presenting high-level summaries of their budgets and staffing and assessing 3 to 7 of their major functions in their units that would be impacted by potential cuts at the 3%, 5%, and 7% levels. This subcommittee is also giving feedback throughout each of these presentations. We're going to collect campus feedback and review our findings and recommendations with the full financial task force and also share that with the campus community. So prioritization findings are being provided back to vice presidents and unit leaders, and we'll incorporate those into our fiscal 21 budget reduction discussions. And we've already received presentations from information management and technology and athletics. And this Tuesday, advancement will be presenting. The university-wide savings subcommittee has also been formed and is reviewing strategies spanning the whole university. It includes compensation issues like across-the-board furloughs, progressive pay cuts, benefit reductions, and early retirement. Also includes expense line items like external contracts, travel, and other items. And each subcommittee is meeting throughout the end of the summer, and they will come back together and present these findings and discussions with the campus community. So as we work through the summer months, we are also engaging our community on issues related to systemic racism, but also as it manifests itself in the UNC community. The murder of George Floyd, another in a long chain of incidents in our country, has sparked protests in Greeley, across the country, and around the world. And I shared a message with our UNC community, including our alumni and friends on June 1st, reaffirming UNC's values of inclusion and respect, highlighting our stand in solidarity with peaceful demonstrations and committing to take action where we can. Groups of our students have led peaceful protests here in Greeley. There were 2 last weekend that I attended, and another is planned for this Saturday, and will actually begin on the UNC campus. I've received a lot of emails from students, faculty, and staff, alumni, and others, and I've taken the opportunity to engage with groups of people in direct dialogue over Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And I have more meetings planned for next week. Students are sharing with us that we can change UNC and begin to address manifestations of racism, discrimination, and bias at our university. And I appreciate that they are sharing ideas with us, but also that they are willing to continue to hold us accountable in making progress. Members of my leadership team, led by Chief Diversity Officer Tobias Guzman, are working on developing those recommendations and other ideas into an action plan. And this isn't one-time work. It's going to require an ongoing commitment and hard work by our entire university community. Planning to start some of this work right now, focusing on training and developing understanding with my cabinet first, recognizing the need for our leadership team to lead the way. And I will be sharing updates with our UNC community early next week about how we are working toward putting action behind the message that I shared with our campus last week. And we are seeing a lot of different manifestations of concerns in these student discussions. One that emerged recently was our partnerships with the Greeley Police Department. I received a few messages about our police activity regarding active shooter and hostage drills and training that happens from time to time in Bishop Blair Hall on campus. One of these trainings happened the same week as the protests. Emails questioning whether we should allow these to continue to happen. And this is certainly a difficult issue. The trainings help our own police force and Greeley Police Department to prepare for the possibility of a shooter on our campus or in our K-12 community. And active shooters are certainly a concern for many of us, including me. However, I'm certainly empathetic to the optics and the way that a student might react to seeing police and SWAT on our campus in a time when police and protesters are clashing in the streets of so many of our cities. So I'm going to stop my update here with maybe we can start with a conversation about your thoughts in navigating this issue in particular.
So Andy, this is Steve. I mean, I very much appreciate the concern that the students have. And at the same time, because of my own experiences as a president, know how important it is when there is a major incident on campus to have access to outside police support to secure the campus and protect students, particularly, you know, if you have, for example, childcare centers on campus, because all of a sudden you have hundreds of parents who are worried about what's happening with their young children. So I do think in the long term, participation of our police department with the Greeley Police Department in how to manage those situations and conduct them in real time is important. But I do believe it's also important that as a part of that training, that we should utilize the strength of our faculty and students to participate in the training, to make sure that, that we're not, simply because we see a person of color, that they're not assumed to be the first suspect, that we're cognizant of all of the possibilities that exist on a campus like ours in that process, and that we even have conversations to be clear about who controls, you know, the process. You know, is it the outside police agency? Is it our campus police that are in charge of the combined operation? What happens if, in the case that I had, where you have outside agencies of the federal government come in because of the nature of the incident that was occurring on campus? So they typically try to take over the situation when they arise on campus. So I think perhaps broadening the participation in the training and spending more time talking about the nature of the university and the broad array of diverse people that they're going to see on campus, and talking more about how is it that they then make a determination of whether someone they see might be a prospective person that they're looking for, and then how do they treat everyone that isn't as they're getting them away from the situation. You know, what things do they say to them? How do they treat everybody the same way? So I just think it's really important that we reconsider the way our training occurs with our police and the Greeley Police together.
Andy, this is Malika. I appreciate you bringing this issue to our attention and asking for our input. I think from a student perspective, speaking for the student body, I think something that would be really appreciated and could also help forge an even stronger partnership between UNC and our law enforcement agencies is giving students advance notice of when the trainings are taking place. You know, the university's decided that this is going to be a space for law enforcement to practice and to do necessary things so that our campus community can feel safe and protected. And so if students know ahead of time, hey, this is going to be happening, I think that can help mitigate some of those feelings of feeling scared or caught off guard when you do see, you know, a lot of law enforcement in one place and wondering, will I feel safe? Because the campus community is for students. So I think that advance notice could be a really helpful tactic.
No, I appreciate that, Malika. I appreciate that. I think, and I believe we may have been doing that previously, but for some reason, maybe that stopped. Maybe someone can contribute to that from the cabinet. I'm not sure what occurred, but I believe in the past, we did announce training.
Andy, this is Dan. I understand from my discussions with our chief of police that they, at some point in the past, they did give notification. I don't know if that stopped recently, or if I don't think it's happened for some time in recent memory, but it used to happen that we gave the sort of advance notice that Malika is talking about.
Well, we should certainly consider bringing that back. Thank you for that input.
Yeah, I think that, you know, explain why it happens, that it's been going on for, I'm guessing, quite a while, right?
I understand for about 20 years, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, okay. And that, you know, the reason why it's important. And, you know, I think it was right to probably ask the police department to postpone. But I think just good communication. I'm one that feels that if you have the right culture, which I truly believe UNC does, that you know, that culture sort of forces you to be right on things, on issues that come up like this. And I think the fact that you preempted the scheduled exercise speaks to that culture. But I think just good communication and briefly explaining why we think it's important is the best way to go. And as Malika said, you know, communicate when these things are going to be done.
Agreed.
Real quickly, I don't have much to add on the training piece. I fully agree with the comments, previous comments, especially by Malika. Communication is key. I guess one thing to strengthen the culture between student body and our law enforcement would be making sure we're keeping track of data. So not necessarily a training piece, but when the police are being called and for what instances, and the disparities, if there are disparities in that, I think that would help with the conversation. So making sure we're keeping track of that data. When is UNC campus taking care of an issue? When is Greeley PD taking care of an issue, and why those issues are happening, and if there's any disparities there. So not on the piece you mentioned, Andy, about training, but I think overall the concept of law enforcement on campus and making sure we're keeping good data on that and having a conversation on disparities if there are any.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Is that the end of your report, Andy?
It is.
Okay, well, thank you. And good luck with the challenges. I do not have a report. Are there any trustees that want to take time now to mention anything? Okay.
Just real quickly, this is Christine. I just want to add my thanks to Malika. You've been a terrific part of our work, and you are an inspired leader, and I look forward to hearing more about where you go from here. And Andy, thank you for the constant communication and the check-ins. I think you're really working hard to not only make sure your team's doing well, but that we are doing well as people, and I appreciate that outreach.
You're welcome.
Any others? Okay, Dan, do you want to give the info about how to make a public comment?
Yes, thank you. For the folks that are on participating and watching this, as you know, normally when we do public comment and allow members of the community to comment on if they so choose on action items before the trustees vote to approve them. Normally we have people that want to do that sign in and we call them up. Because we're doing this virtually, today what we're going to do is, if you'll look at your screen, you'll see that at the bottom near the middle, there's a icon for Q&A. If you wish to make public comment on one of the items, one of the action items, when you bring that up and you start typing, it will list your name as you sign in. If you could please put in the first line, refer to the action item that you're making comment on and type in whatever your public comment is, then the trustees will be able, when they open up the Q&A, to read those comments while the action items are going forward and be able to see your public comment. And those comments will be saved as part of the record of the meeting. So they will be available to the public afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay. We got some information items, and then we'll do public comment as soon as those are over. Fall semester planning. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman Monfort, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I would first just like to reiterate what Andy said. And over spring break in the spring, we did a quick pivot from traditional instruction to alternate delivery. And just to put some of these numbers into context, approximately 2,000 sections taught to over 45,000 seats. So individual students in those seats move from traditional instruction to online instruction or alternate delivery. To facilitate that conversion for students, we changed the withdrawal date for classes, so students would have an opportunity to experience the alternate delivery before they had to make a choice whether they would withdraw or not. Working with the Faculty Senate, we also approved a satisfactory, unsatisfactory grade option for students. Satisfactory, unsatisfactory is the UNC version of pass-fail. And we gave students actually beyond the end of the semester to choose that. Despite the change in the withdrawal rate, the patterns for students, we didn't have any additional withdrawals than what we would expect under a normal circumstance. And of the over 45,000 distinct enrollments, there were only just about 2,300 students who chose a satisfactory, unsatisfactory grade option. So just about 5% of the enrollment chose to move from a letter grade to satisfactory, unsatisfactory. So I'd like to acknowledge and thank our faculty, our staff, and our students really for all that they did to adjust to a fluid situation in the spring. And we were very grateful to them. For the fall, we have a little bit more time to plan. And as Andy said, we are committed to a robust on-campus and as much as possible face-to-face instruction, but doing so in a responsible and safe way for our students, our faculty, and our staff. Katrina and I are co-chairing the Reentry Task Force. And the Reentry Task Force has engaged a wide swath of our campus community. The Reentry Task Force has two subgroups, the Academic Affairs subgroup and the Student Affairs subgroup. Katrina will talk about the Student Affairs subgroup. And the Academic Affairs subgroup is broken into even smaller groups focused on faculty impacts, student impacts, and logistics. For context, prior to COVID-19, our instructional space on campus had over 10,000 seats. So in any one class period, we could accommodate 10,000 students in seats in classes. In going to a socially distanced environment where there's 6 feet of separation between seats in classes, that takes our number down to just over 3,400 seats. So in order to have a robust face-to-face environment, we really have to do quite a bit of planning. And part of the planning that we've done is we've looked at every course that we are offering, and I've really talked a lot about the mode of delivery of that class. Really, some classes need to be taught face-to-face because they require access to specialized facilities, specialized equipment. Things like scientific laboratories, music studios, art studios. Those really require a face-to-face experience. And so we have been focused on identifying those classes and finding the appropriate room to accommodate the number of students. There are other classes which were planned to be or already are taught in an online environment. Again, those are easy because that's the way they were scheduled. Then there's a number of courses in the middle where there's preference to teach them in face-to-face to get that robust experience, but they could be taught in a virtual online environment, whether virtually in a synchronous fashion at a specified time during the week or in an asynchronous fashion. And so what we are doing is we're having our faculty, the experts in the pedagogy, make appropriate decisions based upon what's best for our students in terms of learning, and aligning those classes with the mode of delivery and aligning those classes with our capacity to teach in a face-to-face environment. And so many different things are being considered, including a hybrid environment where some portion of the class meets in a face-to-face environment on Monday, another portion on Wednesday, another portion on Friday. And really those pedagogical decisions are being made at the unit level. we've made a commitment to identifying how every one of our class sections will be taught by the end of June. And so we've assigned those classes that will be taught face-to-face because of facility needs. The deadline for making those determinations was today. And by the end of June, we will know how every section of every course will be taught. And then we'll begin the process of communicating out to students how their schedule looks in the fall. Not changes in times, although it's possible that some classes will have to change time, but rather changes in delivery. And so students will know by hopefully the middle of July how their course schedule will be taught, and give them an opportunity to work with our professional advisors and our faculty advisors if they would like to make changes to that. Our faculty and staff are really committed to ensuring a really solid learning environment for students, whether the class is taught face-to-face, in a hybrid mode, or in a virtual setting. And the focus really is on giving students that really wonderful academic experience. I'll turn it over to Katrina, but be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Maybe I missed it, but so the class size goes, I'm guessing some of the class sizes stay the same, but many of them go down. Is that correct?
I think it's possible that some will go down. That is correct, but we're really working under the assumption that we'll keep the class sizes the same and work around the delivery. And so particularly large classes to our entering students or lower division students, we've identified spaces on campus, including some of the recreational gyms, the ballrooms in the university center, et cetera, where we can accommodate larger numbers of students. And so we're focused on those large enrollment classes to try to room them in an appropriate space. For other courses that maybe have 30 students and the room that they originally were scheduled for has a decreased capacity, let's just say to 15, we're looking at a hybrid option. And again, this is going to be in collaboration with the faculty member teaching that class. We're looking at hybrid options where we can keep the total enrollment the same, but teach it in a different way so that we have smaller groups of students in a face-to-face environment at any one time.
Yeah, Dick, just to add to that, I mean, you can imagine we've had to create diagrams of every single one of our classrooms. We have hundreds of classrooms, and then figure out logistically how we would space students in those classrooms by 6 feet. And we have classrooms of every shape and size. We have classrooms with fixed seating, with fixed tables we can't move, those that we can. And so, you know, we have rooms that would normally seat 60 that after we kind of configure it for social distancing may only seat 20, 18. And that the work that our team has been having to do just to go through every single classroom and model what social distancing would look like has been a significant task for us.
So Dick, what's happening now that we've figured out how many we can fit in each room is each faculty member is being tasked with figuring out, so how do I want to organize my class? So Mark's example actually fits specifically for one of my classes coming up in the fall. And so in the next month and a half, I'm going to have to decide, so how do I want to split it up? How often do I want to meet them in person? Do I want to split them up 15 for, I have a Tuesday, Thursday class. So am I going to meet 15 on Tuesday, 15 on Thursday, and then do something asynchronously online for their second class? There's a whole variety of different ways we can do it, but each faculty member will decide based on the size room they have, how to do the face-to-face and how to do the remote learning.
And to add to that, even how we get students in and out of the classrooms and buildings in a safe way is also just a tremendous challenge for us, as we have typically, you know, a few sets of doors. We've got to find ways in which we have egress and ingress, and you know, just the whole logistic challenge of signage and managing how our campus engages with our facilities is something still underway.
Maybe as time goes on and the summer goes on, hopefully things become more clear, but I think your planning's great and be interesting. You guys are up for the task.
That's a good word. I think the interesting is a good word, Dick.
Interesting is a very good word. I think we are up to the task. And it is very much of a logistical puzzle. As Andy indicated, we are looking at the flow of students in the buildings. We have to consider access to buildings because if we establish an entry point as the entrance and another as the exit, we have to consider student access to that. So there's a lot to it, but again, as Fritz indicated, our faculty really have stepped up and they know the parameters and are working within those parameters and really focus on how can we instruct our students in a pedagogically sound way so that they can have a great experience.
Another set of complexities, Dick, I'm sure Janice can chime in on this too, is just our visual and performing arts programs, and particularly with our performing arts programs and music and choir and voice. It creates a whole set of other complexities in how we deliver instruction to those students in a safe manner.
Yeah, I mean, the flow, I get it, but nobody's monitoring the flow after hours. You know, so I think there's a lot we can do, but you know, human nature also takes over at some point in time too.
One of the things we have spoken a lot about is providing really before the semester and into the semester educational opportunities for our students and staff and faculty about the importance of social distancing, the importance of wearing a mask, and personal responsibility to each other. And so Katrina might talk a little bit about that, but that is something that we've talked a lot about in the logistics group about everybody having responsibility for the community. So I think there's a great opportunity here for us to band together as a community around some of the challenges that the fall semester is going to pose.
Well, we may find things that are more interesting for students, right? Like Fritz said, you know, a Tuesday, Thursday class that's, you know, a hybrid, you know, Tuesday you're half the class there, you know, the other Thursday half. I mean, maybe we'll find some fun things in this that make the whole process better.
From what I'm hearing anecdotally, some have discovered ways of using technology to enhance their learning and to enhance their instruction that they perhaps would not have had we not had to pivot so quickly. So I think there are some good things that have come from this. Yes.
So Mark, on the one hand, I think Fritz's example is a great example of the things that can be done, but it strikes me as well that that's a pretty significant faculty workload issue. If we take his example and we take that class, we split it in half, but then he has to add an offline section. And if he has 3 classes, that's 3 offline sections he's adding to his workload. And that means there's probably something that he was doing that he's going to have to give up doing. And I worry about young faculty who are in their tenure process, who have to both demonstrate teaching and research and service and pick up these additional hours on their teaching load. So it'll be interesting to understand what the implications are over time about how this works. What do we give up in the process of doing this? Because I do think it's essential that we have to give something up, but I think we should understand over time what it is that we're giving up. So I hope that we'll hear back from faculty on how they're making those adjustments.
There's absolutely no question about that, Steve. I think that we certainly understand that and are working with the faculty. We have the Center for Enhanced Teaching and Learning, as well as our instructional design folks who are there to support this conversion. But the fact of the matter is that our Center for Enhanced Teaching and Learning and the instructional design people, we don't have the capacity that we would need given the volume of some of the shifting. And so we're doing the best we can, but I think there is a recognition that one, faculty do need a lot of support in making this conversion. And two, we're really relying upon the community as much as anything because we don't have those built-in supports at the capacity needed right at this moment in time.
So Steve, also, and I really appreciate your comment, it is an additional burden on the faculty, and the Faculty Senate is discussing how this is going to impact, for example, promotion and tenure in the future. And you're going to be voting on one of the very first results in the action items. The Faculty Senate passed an addendum to the tenure clock extension policy having to do specifically with this year. But there's other issues besides for workload, including the fact that we can't travel, and that has had, and some people can't get in their labs. And so some of the research that we do, we haven't been able to do and won't be able to do for the foreseeable future. Believe me, the faculty is currently well aware of these issues and is talking about it in the Senate. And Mark's been very good, Academic Affairs has been very good in interacting with us as we discuss these changes.
Okay, I think we interrupted you now, Katrina, so.
That is all good. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. As Andy and Mark indicated, in the spring, the quick pivot and the staff in student affairs really stepped up to provide virtual activities, offering services, dining and housing, of course. And so I want to take this time to acknowledge and thank our staff, students, and faculty who came together to make the transition possible to serve students in a new environment. So let me share a little bit about what we're doing in the task force on the student affairs side. And I'm very pleased with the work that the task force has completed already. Our goal is to really enhance the student experience and make the experience as robust as possible in this environment. We certainly want to balance the health and safety, social distancing with a tremendous student experience. So we're balancing those two things as we go forward. Tobias has coined a term COVID normal, which I think is helpful here in thinking about what this is like. So many of the things that we're doing, we're considering social distancing, certainly mask wearing, looking at the guidance from the CDC, the state, Weld County Health Department. So these are all guidance and literature that we're utilizing to make decisions. As you can imagine, there are many logistics that go into our housing and dining. We're really all of our functions, but probably housing and dining is the most complex right now. And the staffs are doing such a great job in trying to figure out what are the best approaches for us to take. We're also really consulting the other institutions in the state to see what they're doing. So it's a lot of investigation and culling all the information together to figure out how we want to go forward. Given the guidance from the health department and the CDC, we are able to consider residence hall rooms as a family unit. So that does allow us to honor requests for roommates, to have doubles or suites, that kind of thing, so students can have that experience with a roommate. And it also allows us to honor the rooms that students selected here at UNC. They can select choices of rooms that they would like, sort of in priority order, and we try to accommodate that as much as possible. And so being able to operate as close to normal as we would for assigning rooms, we're going to be able to do that. We also have a number of single rooms. Some of the buildings that we were going to take offline, we're considering putting some or all of them back online to have singles that students can occupy if they feel more safe or, you know, have that need. And we certainly want to provide that option. Housing assignments will be going out at the end of June, as soon as we've got one little piece that we're trying to navigate. And once we get that completed, housing assignments will start to go out, and we know students and families are interested in that information as soon as possible. We also are going to have about 35 quarantined single rooms. They will have their own bathrooms. So if a student is showing signs of symptoms of the virus, as well as those who test positive, we will allow them to move to a quarantine room. We will make sure that they have a microwave and a refrigerator, and we'll also deliver food to the room, deliver meals, so that they can continue that quarantine. Certainly things that Fritz was sharing about classrooms and, you know, the alternating aspect of synchronous, asynchronous pedagogy and delivery, we certainly may need that for students who are quarantined and should not go to class. So as Dick, as you said, you know, human behavior, well, I can go, I feel fine. It's like, no, please stay till we know that you're not going to impact the rest of the community. So those are some things that we're working on. And I, again, happy that the housing and dining staff have kind of figured out how to do that. We're also working on a timeline for student move-in. As you can imagine, our buildings are all different. Certainly elevators, you know, figuring out the up and down and how many can go in, as well as stairwells. So we're really looking at various entry and exit of the buildings in order to facilitate students moving in and coming back out to get their things, that kind of thing. So we're looking at a schedule, reservation sort of opportunity. We'll have, certainly the students are coming from out of state, have a need to be able to purchase their airline tickets and that kind of thing, or plan their trip. So we're looking at that. We may have to extend the timeline for students moving in. We typically have a number of students who come in, let's say the Monday of the week before courses start. And we may have to extend that some. And so we're looking at various ways to do that. So again, the complexity of determining what the best ways are, but we want to have that decision, looking at all these decisions by the end of June so we can let students know. In terms of our dining, we will have a variety of grab and go options as we did in the spring. We're going to expand that to the degree that we can, to have both hot options as well as cold options. And this has been in effect, but we'll increase it. The notion we'll have these reusable containers, to-go containers that can be filled. They will keep food hotter because of the way they're constructed, and students can return them to dining. They get a new one for their meal. Those get washed, and we can recycle those. That will, one, you know, students want more recyclable opportunities, but it also will reduce our purchase of to-go containers as well as other paper goods. So we're, you know, both cost-effective and environmental. The other thing that we're really working on is how to seat students in our dining rooms. While we have permission from the CDC and health department, as you know, places are able to seat up to 50 people or 50%. And while we have some large spaces, we're trying to figure out what is the smooth process, you know, for both the grab and go as well as students dining in, making sure that we're cleaning those spaces if there's a 5-minute delay on letting a surface sit, so that it is disinfected. And so almost like a restaurant, having people come in and out. As we're feeding so many students between classes, especially probably lunch is going to be the bigger challenge, how to do that, what the lines look like. So there, again, the work coming through in terms of recommendations and proposals is extensive. And so we're just trying to make sure that we look at all those and make some decisions. Let's see, we talked about housing density and And then I think the other pieces are really looking at how do we utilize common spaces. We want to create a sense of belonging. We want students to feel connected, to engage with each other, make friends. You know, it's all that student experience as well as be engaged in activities. And so how do we do that in general by thinking about social distancing, how many folks can be in a space at one time. We have to also think about our capacity for kitchens, both in the residence halls and in our cultural and resource centers, which get used widely daily. So how many can be in there, you know, training on cleaning and having supplies available, laundry rooms, how do we affect the flow of traffic there, and other common spaces within the halls. And so and some of our other spaces on campus. So again, looking at some of those pieces. We're also looking at an extended orientation and doing working with our faculty counterparts in the colleges to have activities, workshops on study skills, those kinds of things, some conflict resolution or de-escalating situations. You know, I can imagine there may be folks who feel strongly about wearing masks, those who don't, where we will have an expectation that that happens. And so kind of trying to figure out how to deal with some of these things will be really important. Certainly if we extend our move-in timeline, we're going to have to think of how we also engage students prior to courses starting in a scheduled way. So because we want students to have some things to do if they're here early. So I just again feel really thankful to the folks who are looking at both the student experience in terms of activities and engagement, services, counseling center, disability resource, student outreach, Bear Pantry, all of those. I can't name them all, but they're just doing such a great job in figuring out how to serve our students. And so I'm very grateful for the work that's been done. Happy to take questions or comments.
Are we closing any of the dorms completely?
We are looking at a few we had planned to. So Wilson Hall, I want to think it's maybe 250 students. We've got some small buildings that maybe house 50 or so. So we were looking at closing those. Now we're kind of thinking about, are those a possibility for those who want single rooms? So we're kind of, you know, looking at our occupancy and what the student response is as we start making assignments.
What is our occupancy looking like?
We are looking at a 60% at this point, probably maybe a little bit higher, but we are looking at about 1,830 students total who will live on campus. I don't know the rate of the new students. I know that's total.
Katrina, in terms of the quarantine rooms, is the plan to have those dispersed throughout the dorms, or is it to have them in a single dorm away from the rest of the students? And then could you also speak to the availability of COVID testing at the health center, both for the disease and for antibodies afterwards?
Yes. So we are looking at Turner Hall, one of our high rises that would allow a student to have their own bathroom and in their room. And so my belief is that we're putting them in Turner Hall. And also that would help with food delivery and some of those things, that it's a little bit centralized. So I believe that's our starting place. We will have both testing for the virus as well as antibodies. I'm pretty positive. If that's not accurate, please somebody jump in on that. And we will allow students to be tested there, as well as faculty and staff. And if a student is tested positive or even showing symptoms until they have a chance to get tested, I guess my thought is if they're showing symptoms, they ought to go get tested, right? We'd like to encourage that. The health center will also be checking in with them on a regular basis to make sure that they're doing okay. Blaine, did I get that right about the antibody?
Yes, that's correct, Katrina. Dr. Jordan, we are currently doing both COVID testing, active COVID testing and antibody testing at our student health center. And we've been doing that. We've been doing COVID testing since this all began, actually. And to add a little bit to what Katrina said about our isolation and quarantine rooms, those will be special facilities in Lawrenson and Turner Halls that are self-contained with their own restroom and also have their own individual heating and air conditioning unit. So they have their own individual air source. So we feel really comfortable about that. We're also working really actively on contact tracing plans for the fall. So the ability to identify if we have positive cases, to identify folks that they may have come into contact with so that we can handle that in-house and not rely on the county to have to do that for us.
Terrific, thank you.
Thanks, Blaine. Other questions or comments or suggestions?
Well, I don't know that this is a suggestion, but from a cost standpoint, and I get you got singles and doubles and different buildings. The best bang for the buck as far as cost savings is, to mothball a building or two, but I'll leave that up to you guys to figure that out.
Katrina, there is something in Q&A if you want to answer it.
Oh, okay.
I can answer that one, Andy. The question in the Q&A is about students who get sick and are quarantined. How will we accommodate their instruction? Because if they're quarantined for 2 weeks, they can't go to their classes and things. So part of the conversation with the faculty early on was back in May, June, that we wanted everybody to prepare to teach online just in case things did not get a little bit less restrictive. For students who are quarantined, we want their courses to have some online component so that they can continue that instruction. It's not unlike what happens in any one semester when a student gets ill and is unable to attend a class. And so all faculty are used to that. We have to prepare a little bit differently in the event that it's a large proportion of our students. So students who are quarantined will still receive their instruction. It will be different, like it is in any semester when a student gets sick and is unable to attend. But faculty are well aware of that and making plans accordingly.
Is the quarantine 4 days or 14 days?
14, 2 weeks.
I think somebody ought to look into that. I know that, we just ought to make sure that, I've heard 14, I've also heard 4. I know that, somebody ought to look into that.
Of course. And I think too, as the summer goes along, however the guidance may shift, we're of course watching all of that to determine, what shifts we might have to make. So agree, Dick, that we are looking very closely at all those pieces. I think the other thing that's kind of on our minds is, if we have a number of cases in a particular area building, what that means in terms of perhaps quarantining a floor or those kinds of things. So we've got to, like I said, we're just sort of keeping track of all of the guidance so we can determine our best moves forward. It's interesting, as you said.
Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and all of our recommendations and how we're moving forward are really being guided by the information that Blaine is bringing back to the university from CDPHE.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. sabbaticals.
Again, thank you, Chairman Monfort. For the benefit of the new members of the Board of Trustees, faculty sabbatical is an academic tradition where faculty have an opportunity to grow professionally. And by board policy, our faculty are eligible for sabbatical during their 6th year of employment by the university, or to apply for sabbatical 6 years after a prior sabbatical. In both instances, the sabbatical is to be taken during the 7th year. And so this year we had 26 applications for sabbatical from faculty across all units of the university. One of those was ultimately determined to not be eligible because there hadn't been enough time to pass between their previous sabbatical and this application. So 25 total sabbaticals were applied for and approved. Of those 25, as Fritz indicated earlier, some were to travel. One has already applied to delay their sabbatical because they are unable to travel. And we have a few others that we anticipate will ask also for a delay because of travel restrictions that are present in the country, but also at the university. So we have 25 faculty, and in the board book, you can see the topics that people are looking at pursuing during their sabbatical, as well as whether it's a 1 semester or a 1 year sabbatical. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Very good.
Hiring of deans.
Thank you very much. This year, we conducted 4 searches for academic deans. We ended up with 3 hires. And I just want to introduce very briefly the 3 that we've hired. For the Monfort College of Business, we hired Dr. Cher Gibbs. Dr. Gibbs is previously was the director of the School of Management at the University of Southern Mississippi. She has an expertise in entrepreneurship with a particular focus on entrepreneurship from underrepresented populations. Cher actually is in town and may be listening in. I'm not sure. The Dean of the Graduate School and Associate Vice President for Research is Dr. Jerry Annette Lyons. Dr. Lyons comes to us from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she currently is Associate Dean for the College of Health Sciences. And I know Dr. Lyons is going to be arriving in town next week. She's actually been participating in research office meetings for about the last 6 weeks. So we're really happy to have Dr. Lyons here as well. And then Dean of the University Libraries is Dr. Jennifer Neutfall. And she comes to the university from to UNC from Santa Clara University in Santa Clara, California. And she actually knows our Chief of Staff, Dan Maxey, from previous interactions. So those are the 3 deans. Cher and Jennifer are in town, and we're really excited for them to be here. And Jerry Annette will be here next week. All start officially with the university on July 1.
Are all your dean positions filled then?
The one search that we conducted was the Dean of the College of Education Behavioral Sciences. We made an offer. And the candidate we made the offer to ultimately declined the offer. We have appointed Dr. Trent Lalonde as the interim dean. Trent has been the chair of the Department of Applied Research and Statistical Methods for a number of years now. And we're really excited to welcome Trent as an interim dean, and we'll initiate that search for a permanent dean at the beginning of the fall semester. We also have an interim dean, Kiki Gilderhus, as the Dean of the College of Performing and Visual Arts. And we will initiate a search for a permanent dean for that college also at the beginning of the fall semester.
Thank you. Personnel items, Dan.
Yes, this is the usual information item that we provide the board for exempt hires that have been hired since the February meeting for your information.
Okay. Any questions on any of those? Okay. Are there public comments out there? Andy, you seem to know when there was a question. I don't know how to figure that one out.
There was just the one so far.
Any other folks want to make any public comments or questions? If not, we will turn it over to you, Michelle.
Actually, Chairman Monfort, I want to say a few words first, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
So I'm again asking our campus to come together to confront financial challenges as we address the impact of COVID-19. Also wrap up this year, fiscal 20, and plan for fiscal 21. In April, we thought that the effect of COVID-19 this year would be to erase all of our fiscal 20 surplus. However, campus stepped up and reduced expenditures this spring such that we actually expect to add $2 million to our operating reserves in fiscal 20. For fiscal 21, we are bringing forward a provisional budget, and our intent is to return to you to seek action on a revised fiscal 21 budget in the fall, and we're planning sometime towards the later part of September. We're planning for about $175.8 million in revenue next year, which is about 15% less than we had in fiscal year 19, and $24 million less than we would have had in fiscal 21 before COVID-19. And you'll hear from Michelle that we're going to address the $24 million in three pieces. One, we've already identified about $6 million in savings for fiscal 21. Two, our financial task force that you heard about earlier is working to find an additional $10 million in savings. And three, we plan to cover the remainder of the deficit by using about $7 million in operating reserves. Importantly, our fiscal 21 budget also includes a decision about tuition and fees for our students. We have been planning for about a 3% increase in resident tuition and fees, but considering the current circumstances in Colorado and beyond, I am recommending that UNC hold tuition flat for the coming academic year. And this recommendation is consistent with the actions of almost all other Colorado public colleges and universities. And in this time of economic instability and uncertainty, this is also the best decision for our students, many of whom have lost their own jobs or have family members who are out of work. I do propose some modest fee increases, including a $55 increase to student services fees, which cover a wide variety of support functions to help students persist to graduation, and a $20 increase to the technology fee to cover additional costs associated with delivering instruction in hybrid and online formats while offering new software and services online. I also recommend that we hold the library, capital, and leave fees flat. You're going to hear more about that from Michelle, and I'll hand over the conversation to her.
Good morning. In your packets behind tab C, there are some materials. As Andy said, this is a provisional budget, and we are seeking approval on this budget to allow us to have the time over the summer to continue to work on identifying specific cost savings, as well as see how our enrollment and revenue are actually shaping up for the fall. Our intent is then to come back to you in the fall and seek approval on a revised budget as we have more specifics about the ways in which we will be making cost reductions. The first chart that I will call your attention to is table 1 on page 1. Andy spoke to the fact that we are actually very pleased with the work that campus has done And also our summer revenue, you may recall in April, we were anticipating that summer revenue could be down as much as 25%. On the graduate side, it's about flat. On the undergraduate side, it's only down about 12%. So that with cost savings has really helped us. And we do anticipate increasing cash this year by $3.3 million. Table 1 shows the portion that is what I refer to as committed cash. That's sort of what's going in and out of the conceptual checkbook. It's sort of the working capital, and it is also the money that is committed to ongoing capital projects. So our operating budget cash basically remains flat. That $19.5 million number is kind of what is needed at June 30th to manage cash flow through our low point in our cash cycle in mid-August. The capital project portion represents actual projects that we are committed to. We did this spring cancel $1 million of projects that the board had previously approved as part of the FY20 budget to kind of scale back our capital projects to only those things that were most essential. But we also have a number of things that have been deferred just as we're sort of managing the appropriate ways to get capital construction done in the COVID-19 environment. So if you see in the first column there, we ended last year with $3.2 million in cash that was committed towards capital projects. We're up a little bit this year. We'll end with $4.1 million. Again, that's related to the deferrals, and it is after the cancellation of $1 million of capital projects that we would have otherwise done. Restricted fund cash is cash associated with grants and contracts, as well as the Perkins Loan Program. The Perkins Loan Program is decades old and it is being phased out. It was a loan program for students. And as we collect the cash from students that have Perkins loans, we have to return that cash to the federal government. So in looking at our committed cash, or what conceptually I refer to as a checkbook, we will end the year at about $24 million in cash. Then we also have reserves, which are conceptually akin to a savings account. Last year, we ended at a total of $18.5 million of reserves. This year, we are looking at $21.5 million of reserves. So in total, total cash last year, $42.5 million. Our forecast for the end of this month, which is the end of the fiscal year, is an increase of $3.3 million to $45.8 million. Any questions or clarifications about our expectations in terms of ending up the current fiscal year? Okay. So now I'll jump right into the provisional FY21 budget. Enrollment patterns this year have certainly changed significantly as both new students and continuing students are adapting to all of the significant changes in their lives and their families' lives, as well as the really challenging issues that we're facing as a society as whole. And so the patterns are just very, very different. We are projecting a 10% decrease in undergraduate enrollment for the fall. As I mentioned a couple of moments ago, our summer enrollment is down 12%. So we think that that is reasonably consistent with what we're seeing in summer, particularly as we are able to, again, provide a greater level of face-to-face instruction. And it also is consistent with the point-in-time markers that we are seeing in registrations and applications and confirmations. For graduate students, enrollment continues to look strong there, and we are planning for flat enrollment with graduate students in the fall. any questions or comments about where we are with enrollment. And if you have questions or comments, I will quickly turn it over to Mark Anderson, who has been working with enrollment management in the grad school to track all this information.
So first time freshman, where are you there?
So first time, oh, I'm sorry. Mark, go ahead if you'd like to.
I was going to say, I'm looking right now on the dashboard. Point in time confirmed, we're down about 306 first-time, full-time freshmen. We're sitting at 1567 head count. Last fall, we finished up at 1873. So we're down about 300 or so point in time.
And
that's not really a point in time.
Point in time confirmations as of today, right now, as of last year at the same exact time, we're down 306.
Okay.
Deposits.
And where did we end up last fall? We didn't end up at
1873.
What's that?
1,873 first-time, full-time freshmen.
And you had that many a year ago?
Yes.
So we held steady the rest of the year?
Mostly what happens is, well, I mean, there is certainly some attrition throughout the year, but last year, most of the deposits and confirmations would be done by now. I do believe though that we still have lots of students and families on the sidelines, not only here, but across the country, that are waiting to see what fall looks like and see whether or not we're going to be online or in person. So I do believe these numbers are going to change a little bit, and we'll see an additional inflow of deposits and confirmations as we head towards August.
Okay.
So Michelle, if I can, maybe this is a question for Mark. So you mentioned in your kind of write-up that it's been, and in your kind of remarks that it's been significantly disrupted this year. So just kind of looking through the next couple months, are we really not going to have any sense until kind of the first day of school? Or, are there any kind of big deadlines or timelines coming up where we'll have kind of more of a real sense as to kind of what enrollment will actually be kind of going into the fall?
Mark, I can start, and then do you want to jump in?
That's fine with me. Go ahead.
So I think Maya, we are tracking the kinds of point in time markers that we look at include both housing commitments and confirmations. And in the past, we required, or in the last several years, the way that we've measured confirmation is with a financial deposit. We've lifted that requirement this year. We're tracking those things, as Andy and Dick were just talking about. When we look at our confirmations right now, we're sort of using that as the best available information. I know that we've been really fortunate to have our new AVP of Enrollment Management has already been, although she's maybe just this week officially on board, has been working on that. And and I think Mark can sort of speak to what she expects to change over the summer.
Yeah, just for context, in a regular year, many universities have May 1 as the deadline for accepting your acceptance at the institution. And so typically, given that, by May 16th, our confirmations are pretty consistent with our census numbers, which is basically after about 1 week of fall classes. Throughout most universities, because of COVID-19, sort of changed their deadline for accepting admission to the university. And although not an official deadline, it was June 1 was kind of the time when there was an expectation that students would confirm. And so we saw a sort of a continuous change in our new first-time, full-time confirmation throughout May. And frankly, the numbers fluctuated dramatically. And then since about June 1st, it has stabilized right at about 300. It's bounced between 280 and 310 pretty consistently. So we feel pretty good that the confirmation numbers for new first-time students are stabilizing. But as Andy indicated in his president's report, we are doing a lot of community forums in a Zoom environment with families who have either deposited and confirmed, and those who have applied and have been accepted but have not yet confirmed, answering a lot of questions about how the fall semester will look. And so I'm with Andy in that I believe that a lot of families are sitting on the sidelines waiting to know what the student experience is going to be in the fall. And so we've been, I think, pretty upfront about what we're doing and what we know, and giving out information to students and their families so that they can make informed decisions. Another thing that we're doing is we're scheduling these types of community forums for students who were registered in the spring but have not yet registered for the fall. We've reached out to those students continuously to understand what are their concerns. And we've done some surveying. And one of the concerns early in the COVID-19, so in the May timeframe, students were very concerned about their personal economies, their family's job situation, et cetera. And so we're continuing to follow up with those students to see where they're at, but also to assure them about how we're going to be instructing in the fall. So although we have stabilized a lot in terms of our commitments, we do anticipate that between new first-time students, families who are sitting on the sidelines waiting for some clarity on the fall semester, as well as what we're doing with returning students, that we will see some improvement over the course of the summer. And then another thing that we've been aggressive about over the last year is looking at our transfer student population. And transfer students, their enrollment patterns are a little bit different, and we generally see those enrollments increase over the course of the summer. So we're paying attention to that, and particularly with our Aims to UNC program, we feel pretty good about the opportunities with transfer students. But as Michelle indicated, the patterns have been a little bit different this year for a number of reasons, but the COVID-19 pandemic sort of exacerbated some of the patterns which were already in place.
Thank you. And also thank you for kind of the extra effort. I think it's great to hear about the Zoom forums. I think it's really necessary, but I know it's a lot of work. So thank you.
Thanks for saying that. And it's not just Andy and myself and Katrina, it's really the entire campus community who's stepped up to really get involved in the recruitment efforts. So our faculty and staff have been very active in that as well.
Michelle, I just have a couple of questions based on what you stated. So I believe I asked a previous question at the last board meeting, an iteration of this at least. About 12% of students, you mentioned there's been a 12% decrease in summer enrollment. Has there been a decrease in the students that are going to summer classes, a decrease in credits? So are they taking less courses per enrollment per se? I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm wondering, go ahead, sorry.
Yes, your question makes a very good sense.
Good.
Summer average course load, I don't know offhand, but as you might imagine, it's much smaller than it would be during the fall semester or spring semester. I mean, usually students are taking, maybe 4 credits or 6 credits, something like that. My guess would be, and Mark may be looking it up as I'm talking here, my guess would be that has not changed significantly. When we looked at spring enrollments, they were pretty consistent. Obviously, COVID-19 didn't impact until late in the semester. But for fall, our initial information on registration suggests that we're not seeing, wide swings in the number of classes that students are taking for the fall. Mark, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if maybe you're kind of checking into some of those details now and have anything to add. And if you don't, Pratik, we certainly will be monitoring that and seeing how that evolves as we head into the fall semester.
So I did just look it up real quick. Compared to summer of 2019, Summer 2019, we had a total of 29,500 student credit hours. Summer of 20, we have 26,700. So that's down just about 10%. Little
no
over
different.
10%.
Asking on the load per student. So like
load per student.
typically I think we're around maybe 5 credits per average, 5 credits per students in the summer, and whether or not, you know, we see patterns where students are taking fewer credits per head.
Those numbers would suggest they aren't.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. It would suggest they're actually taking more if one's 10 and one's 12, right?
I tell you what, that'll take me about 3 minutes to get at. I'll send you a private chat, Pratik, with those numbers.
That's no problem at all. A couple of really other quick questions. I know some of the higher education care dollars went out and has been distributed, I think a couple million through Title IV, but then the other about 1.2 million, I believe, was through an application process. I don't know if we're talking about this later on, but has that application process been specified? And do students know about it? Is my second question.
Mark, do you want to take that one as well? Or I can. So Pratik, students have been informed about the process. Part of what we wanted to do with the remaining $1 million of those higher education relief funds, emergency relief funds for students, the 1.2 million, was make sure that it was available not just now, but also as students are continuing to sort of have economic challenges in the fall and spring semesters as well. There is an application process. There's an online application. There's some pretty straightforward questions, and it's trying to be as open-ended as possible so as to, you know, just realizing that we can't really know what the students' needs are, and we want them to be able to articulate it to us.
Thank you. And last quick question based on that. I apologize for 3 different questions. I promise I won't be a habit.
Please.
There's always I would love to know, based on historical data, what percentage of students who have committed, have given the deposit, have done everything, have every indication that they are going to school on day 1, still do not show up. I've seen reports nationwide that show up to 15% of low-income students and 10% of students overall deposit their money, sign up for classes, but then for whatever reason, don't come on day 1. Can you, and I'm worried that that might actually be more in this uncertain situation. Is that something you guys are tracking, and are you worried about that more so this time around than in previous years? Thank you.
Yes, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I've got people that are sending me texts here, so I'm going to, I think our historical melt information is around 5%, but hopefully somebody will send that to me. And I can also tell you that our summer credit hours per student are up slightly per undergrad. They're at 6.4 credit hours per student, which is up 0.2 from the prior year. And our summer credit hours for graduate students are just about flat at 6 credit hours. And hopefully somebody will send either Mark or I a text or something in the chat here to answer the question about MELT. But I do think it's around 5%.
Yeah, so Matt just texted that it is about between 4 and 5%. And yeah, Michelle just gave you the student credit hours, but we are up a little bit in the mean student credit hour per student, summer 20 versus summer 19.
This is the nice thing about Zoom meetings is you can have all kinds of data flying at you, and you can actually look like you know what you're talking about.
Exactly. I just got a text as well that we have had over 300 students apply for the CARES supplemental money. So that is so far. So just to kind of give you a point in time.
Okay, I've got a couple of other revenue things to talk about. First, I'll draw your attention to table 2 on page 2. Pratik, you were asking about the funds that are going directly to students. That is towards the bottom there, the CARES Here funds, higher education emergency relief funds, with half of that being distributed to students, as you just articulated, and the other half coming to the institution to meet a pretty limited set of needs. The way that most institutions are using it and the way that we are planning to use that $3.8 million is to help cover the costs of the housing and dining credits that we have given to students for the fall semester. That will not fully cover all of that. Total credits are about $4.5 million, but we will use the CARES Here funds to offset 3.8 million of it. Above that in the table, there is also a reference to the CARES CRF or Coronavirus Relief Fund dollars. This is about $2 billion that came to the state of Colorado. The total was a $150 billion pot totally across the nation. Colorado got about $2 billion, about 300 million of that went to state and local jurisdictions, and about 1.7 million went to the state to distribute. The governor issued an executive order that distributed 450 million of that to higher education institutions. And as you can see, UNC's share of that 450 million is 24.9. There are some pretty strict limitations about how those funds can be used. They cannot be used to backfill the state budget. They have to be used to address COVID-19 effects, and they must be used between March 1st of this year and December 30th of this year. So it's a little bit of an interesting situation where the money is actually crossing fiscal years. I have shown it in this budget as all in fiscal year 21. As we continue to make sure that we are using those funds in the way that they're intended, we may ultimately use them to cover some costs from FY20, and I'll update you on exactly how we do that when we have the revised budget in the fall. The governor's executive order indicated that that $24.9 million is to be used for compliance with COVID-19 public health measures, as well as to stimulate the economy by supporting the workforce through retention and completion. So those are the things that we are looking at. Obviously, we have some things that we can identify as specifically related to COVID-19. As we prepare for reentry in the fall, we're going to need to have, floor stickers that ask people to stay 6 feet apart. We've got to look at potentially additional sort of barriers to ensure that we are providing the appropriate health and safety measures for students, as well as technology needs to put not only classes, but many of our student services and student support activities online. That is one piece of it. The other piece that we will be using that CARES Coronavirus Relief Fund money for is that stimulating the economy and the workforce development and how we retain and make sure that students continue to completion. And some of that is, we're still working through the details. Some of the information from the Treasury Department has been a little bit unclear, and we want to make sure that we're in compliance with the use of those funds.
Which, you said that it's not a backfill to the budget, but it most certainly is a backfill to the budget. I mean, they cut the budget from 850 to 357, so.
Correct. It certainly helps us because it allows us to identify specific things that we can do that are in compliance with that. So it's very important relief to us. But we also need to make sure that we're complying with the federal regulations where we don't where we're mindful of how we use those funds.
Yeah, but the state didn't, so I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I mean, truly, I mean, we got 47 million last year, we got 43 million this year. I mean, so I mean, I get it, and I get that it's, you know, it's part of our funding, and you know, whether it buys stickers or not, it's part of what we have to operate.
Yeah, and we will absolutely be able to use all of it, and that's built into the assumptions of the budget.
Dick, what I do worry about though is that I think for this year it's fine. And by the way, I congratulate Andy and the presidents for negotiating a deal that made the net budget cut only 5% after the addition of these stimulus money. But what I worry about, and Dick, you'll recall this, is that in the recession in 08-09, we got 2 years of stimulus money. So we knew we had that because the state wasn't going to be coming back fast enough in terms of general fund. And this is 52% of our budget. And I do not believe for a second that the state revenues are going to come back so strong for next year that they'll be able to make up all of those budget cuts that they made to higher ed. And even, you know, in the 08-09, what happened was at the end of the second year, the state still couldn't make it up. And that's what started the big increase in tuition that everyone railed about after 5 or 6 years about higher ed sticking it to everybody. Well, it was because they never made up for the budget cuts that were made in the first recession. So I worry a lot that we have this big of a backfill to make up in a single year. And I think it's going to be incumbent upon us as trustees to really keep our eye on it, and perhaps to be partnering with our other trustees of the other institutions as we move into next year to try to make sure that we don't get stuck with a position of having to just put it on the backs of students to make up for the shortfall.
Trustee Jordan, you're absolutely correct. You know, one of the concerns is if you look at our budget, close to $50 million of our funding comes from state appropriations, and a 58% reduction in that, if we didn't have the CARES Act relief funding, would be close to $30 million of a reduction to UNC. So certainly we are very concerned about what fiscal 22 looks like if there is not a significant improvement in tax revenue in the state of Colorado. And if that 58% reduction of budget by the JBC were to hold into fiscal 22 and we didn't have backfill from the federal government, we have a serious financial challenge to address.
Yeah, like a $25 million problem.
At least if 25 to 30 million. Yeah, I think 58% is closer to, that's like $28 million. That's being right now backfilled by one-time money from the federal government.
Right. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if next year the state funding for higher education is 357 million and there is no CARES fund, we're all in world of hurt. So.
The third piece of CARES funding that I'll just briefly mention is the governor's education emergency relief fund, or the GEAR fund, which for Colorado is about $44 million. And I know Andy and the presidents have been talking about that, and there will be a grant process, and we are actively working to apply for those grant funds. Andy, do you want to say some more about the GEAR funds?
Well, you said it all. There's an innovation fund that the governor's set up. They're not going to directly allocate funds to particular universities. There's going to be some money set up, I think, in the next month or so to support the actual grant application process, like some small seed money of $10,000 to help write the grants. And they're looking for grant applications somewhere between $250,000 and a couple of $1 million that I'm assuming they'll review and have some decisions made by fall. I still can't tell whether this money is more earmarked and focused on K-12 and how much of it will actually go towards public higher education institutions. It's not clear.
The last piece of our revenue is the auxiliary revenue. We've talked. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me interrupt. So the CARES, HEER, which is what Pratik was talking about, I believe, correct? So the 3.8 that went to students, that went to students from last year, is that correct?
So about 2.5 million of it we've already dispersed, and it's gone directly to students. And we used criteria like we differentiated the amounts that went to students based upon their financial aid situation. The remaining 1.2 million or so is being distributed through an application process that we expect to continue at least through the fall and potentially the spring.
And those are students that are continuing?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And then what happened to the 3.8 that went to UNC?
So that's what we are using to cover the cost of the housing and dining credits that we have issued to students from spring that we're allowing them to use on their bill for fall. That's covering that cost of that, or that lost revenue, I guess I should say.
So it really is more fiscal 21 than it is 20.
Yes, it's backfilling that. Yep.
Okay, so all of that 3.8 is being used for that?
Yes, because the total amount will be something over 4 million, so it actually doesn't even fully cover it.
Okay, so you got the credit last year, which helped you in the cost of goods, correct?
Yeah.
And then this will be to cover revenue you would have received because these students took credit.
Right. So on an accrual basis, it affects FY20. On a cash basis, it affects FY21.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, I know Andy took a little heat for standing to his guns there, but I think it was a good plan, and hopefully it helped students decide to come back this next year, correct? That's what the plan was, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'll also add, Dick, regarding the CARES Here funding, you know, it was unfortunate the Department of Education did not allow any of these funds to be used to support our DACA students. And so through philanthropic support of the university, we're able to provide particularly, you know, our DACA students with funding along the same lines we're providing our other Title IV eligible students.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so for fiscal year 21, we are also anticipating significant reductions in our auxiliary revenues. Some of that is, of course, housing and dining. We've already mentioned the 60% opening occupancy. This year, the fall of 19, we opened up at about 85% occupancy. So it's a significant reduction in both our room and board revenue. We also are planning for reductions in our conferences and events revenue. Some of that is because of limitations on group sizes. So particularly over the summer, typically we have camps and we have everything from weddings to chemistry conferences that take place in our university center, and also make use of the residence hall room, the dining halls. For this summer, almost all of that revenue has been lost. And even as we head into fall, we're anticipating that there will be limitations on that. Furthermore, as Mark mentioned, in order to accommodate our classes, we will be using ballrooms and other facilities that normally would have been available for rent and events to accommodate instruction. So further reasons why we do not anticipate, or why we are planning for significant reductions in our auxiliary revenue for next year. Given what we know now, all in all, we are expecting a $24 million revenue shortfall. And Dick, just to make sure that I'm kind of being clear, that's taking into account that CARES Coronavirus Relief Fund. So that's 24 million, even after the inflow of that 24 million of coronavirus relief funds. And he mentioned that we are addressing that in 3 ways. First of all, we have already identified $6 million of savings. There's some bullet points on page 2. These are all things that we've talked with you about before. some utility savings, reducing some of our capital budgets. We've had some limited furloughs in June and July, and the senior staff has taken a 10% pay cut. We also had to not make salary increases that we had planned to make for FY21. So that's the first $6 million. The second $10 million is to be identified through the task force work that Andy talked about in his comments at the beginning. We're looking at all university functions, and we're also looking at temporary tools like additional furloughs, potential graduated pay cuts, salary and benefits, the whole array of options. The remainder will come through use of our operating reserves. I mentioned at the beginning, we anticipate that at the end of this year, we will have $8.3 million in operating reserves. So this is using $7 million of those operating reserves under this provisional budget. All right, I'm going to take your attention to page 4, table 3. This provides you with a very high level summary of our budget for FY21. Included in the very first column is an updated forecast for the current year. This is, typically we do forecasts at the end of each quarter. Given all of the changes taking place here, we actually updated our forecast at the beginning of May so that we could give you the most up-to-date information in terms of how we think we will end this year. So the first column shows you that after COVID-19, we believe we'll end the year with $193.6 million of revenue. We've already talked about the fact that we will increase operating reserves by $2 million. And then we also had an additional million or so increase to capital reserves for a total increase to cash of $3 million. Then the columns to the right of that, we first start with what our budget would have looked like were it not for COVID-19. And this is the same budget that we talked to you about in April to say, here's how our budget was shaping up prior to COVID-19 hitting. And then the remaining columns there first show you the details of the $24 million revenue impact. You can see the change there in room and board revenues, federal funding, and other revenue, which includes those conferences and catering kinds of things that I spoke about a moment ago. The next column shows the $6 million that we have already identified. And then the second to last column shows the $10 million that we will identify. The $7 million and $3 million split there between personnel and non-personnel is for example purposes only. We have not absolutely decided that it will be 70% personnel and 30% non-personnel, but given the way our budget is divided, we've used that allocation as an initial cut there, or initial way of slicing up that reduction. The final column shows you what our provisional budget looks like, and this is what we are seeking your approval on. This is how we will operate for the first quarter before coming back to you with a revised budget. It has $175.8 million of revenue. This is 15% less than we had 2 years ago. So this has been a really challenging shift for the university. Board members, I know you're well aware of the fact that spring of 2019, we made $10 million of cuts. This spring, we made an additional $5 million of cuts. And now over the summer, we are going to be looking for another $10 million of cuts to address the changes in our revenue. The expenditures there, personnel, 122 million, non-personnel, 40 million, bond and lease payments, and then our strategic investment expenses of 2.5 million. I'm just gonna pause real quick on that. And I think as Andy and I were talking through this may need to be renamed. What we mean by strategic investment expenses are project-based expenses. So they are sort of one-time allocations of dollars. They include things like startup packages for new faculty. So they're not things that are ongoing parts of our base budget, but they're, you know, when a new faculty member arrives, there may be a commitment to the faculty member to set up their lab, and it may be something that takes a couple of years to do, and those funds are available until fully used, and then they go away. The other things that we run through this part of our sort of one-time budget are any technology projects. We have canceled all technology projects except for things that are absolutely essential to getting courses online so that we can deliver the kinds of hybrid instruction effectively. And so no new administrative technology, just things that are about making the transition to how we will be delivering courses in the fall. Bottom line shows a $7 million use of reserves. And I think I'll pause there to see if there are any questions about what we are proposing as our provisional budget to work through the first quarter.
So
So
Michelle,
your non-personnel, in May, you were at 38.9, now you're at 40.
So the 38.9, Dick, was our forecast for the full year for May. So you are absolutely correct that what we are proposing for a budget is slightly more than we actually spend this year. And as we work through the 10 million, we may find that we adjust that and we're taking more out of our non-personnel expenses. So when we come back with a revised budget, it could be lower than that. I can tell you that in fiscal year 19, we spent about $44 million. So much of this is kind of one-time savings that have been employed. We've talked a little bit about travel and so on.
Yeah, I mean, but you've got a lot less people in the dorms. You've got a lot less food. I'm guessing that's a fairly good portion of the non-personnel expense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you did 70% personnel and 30% non-personnel, because that's sort of the way the numbers shake out, right?
Yep.
So, but I would hope that we could really bear down on the non-personnel expense.
Yeah, Dick, I think it's going to really depend on what the fall looks like too, and how we're delivering on instruction and the work we'll need to do, and seeing how many of our classes are online and how many are in person as well.
What I guess I don't know why that bears. I mean, you had about 25% of the year online in 20, and your personnel expense was 38.9, and that may have been a low number. It was 44 in 19, but it's still, I mean, there's got to be more savings there, I gotta believe.
I hope so.
Michelle, the
Yeah.
part of the risk that you're asking us to accept then is that within the 174 million in proposed operating expenditures, baked into that is that 10 million of savings that you intend to achieve, but have not yet identified how you will achieve that.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And when do you know, or when do you think you'll have at least identified what those strategies will be?
So that's a really important question, Dr. Jordan. And I think that there's a few things that I can share with you. The first is that housing and dining, conferences and catering, and athletics have already identified 3 additional scenarios in terms of how they would make reductions. So they have ways that they would do that. The remainder of it is the work of the task forces, and Andy has really asked the task forces to work on an accelerated time frame. They've been working, or excuse me, they've been meeting weekly. I think that by the end of July, we will be identifying, we'll have a range of options that we'll be needing to make decisions about what's going to be implemented. I'm sure you've seen that some institutions have instituted furloughs across the board. We have not done that yet. The furloughs that we've done that are included in the $6 million of savings were ones where we had individuals who were actually, because of us being in a remote operating environment, they were actually not fully employed, and so they were furloughed, and we've been able to let them take advantage of some of the unemployment provisions that have come through with the federal government. So those were the only furloughs that we've done at this point. I think probably furloughs will be something that we will need to consider, but what the extent of that will be, we're working on that and sort of balancing it with the permanent changes that we've asked the task force to identify as well. So long answer to your question, I think that it will be shaping up no later than the end of July. So in terms of the risk that we're asking the board to assume here in this operating budget, it's kind of a 3-month sort of risk that will continue to work over the summer and then come back to you early in the fall to say, here's specifically where we're going to do it.
Okay.
Michelle, just to add to that too. So the meetings that I'm having with the prioritization subcommittee, reviewing all of our divisions and also including athletics and information management and technology. Those meetings are being held every week, every Tuesday morning for a couple of hours, and they'll wrap up late July. And then I hope to have discussions, obviously, more broadly with the campus community and with the cabinet on what some of our findings are. And in each of those discussions, vice presidents and unit leaders are presenting scenarios for a 3%, 5%, and 7% budget reduction. So if you look at the $10 million, it's roughly about a 6% or so reduction of our budget. And certainly there's work being done with Michelle's subcommittee as well that are more broad-based, broad spectrum budget reduction scenarios. But I think in tandem, we'll have a solid understanding of the ways in which we can reduce our budget by late July or let's say early August.
Michelle, this is Janice. Are these decrease considerations multi-year? Are you looking at them and weighing them as things that could be extended over the duration of 2 years because this is going to be a long-term recovery?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And that was one of the early conversations that we had with the financial task force. And I know Oscar Levin was on earlier, our incoming faculty senate chair, and he was sort of saying, well, how much of what we do is sort of one-time kinds of things and how much it needs to be permanent reductions. And we had, I think, a good discussion, and I think the financial task force realizes that, we do need to be looking for the things that are changing the way that we do business, so that we are addressing not just fiscal year 21, but also some of the risks associated with fiscal year 22 that I think you're referring to, and that Dick certainly articulated and Steve mentioned as well. So we're focusing on ways of changing how we do business and making base reductions. And that's why we're looking at every function at the university. But we also have tools in the toolbox for some temporary kinds of things like furloughs that would allow us to, address what we are unable to do or what we don't think makes sense to do for the long term.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I mean, some of the challenges here are enrollment stabilization. I mean, some of the impacts that we're seeing this year with enrollment, I don't think are going to be permanent. I think that there'll be a rebounding in student enrollment, not only here, but nationally as things settle out. It's also difficult for us, again, to predict state funding. And it really depends on economic recovery of Colorado and nationally, and that has such a huge impact on our budget. So, you know, we're having to make some of these decisions with limited information. We don't want to cut so deep that it, you know, negatively impacts the student experience. At the same time, we don't want to dip too deep into our reserves because, you know, that has other implications. And so it's really finding a balance in these reductions. And in fact, that's why, you know, when we had conversations about what we think we can do this year, you know, it's really a $17 million problem for us. We've already kind of identified 6 million, but the rest of it is unidentified revenue losses. And so, you know, we've kind of made the kind of rough back of the envelope decision that we're going to be focusing on a $10 million reduction, knowing full well that, you know, part of that's going to be one time and part of it's going to have to be permanent reductions. But we, you know, and kind of the placeholder is whatever's left in these reductions is going to come out of our reserves. That's $7 million. But, you know, there's so much variability between even now and August on the impact of this and well into the fall. We may have to make, you know, drastic changes during the semester, whether it be, you know, changing to complete remote instruction in the middle of the semester if there was a reason to, based upon state guidelines and requirements, or maybe easing of restrictions even more. So it's we're trying to give it be conservative and also you know, focus on what we believe is most important is the, you know, what we our promise to our students and the experience that they have at UNC.
So Michelle and Andy and Mark might be able to chime in on this. The $2.5 million in strategic investment expenses, which you connected to, in part or in large part to faculty hiring. I'd like to hear a little bit more about faculty hiring plans and the extent to which those might be discussed as part of the prioritization or the financial subcommittees. It's my understanding that we're not planning on doing a whole lot of hiring, and we didn't do a whole lot of hiring in this last year for faculty at least. So I'd like to hear a little bit more discussion on that and how firm that $2.5 million number is.
Sure. So Fritz, a great question. You're absolutely right. Much of that is related to hires that were previously made. So unlike our operating budget, which is a 1-year allocation and then what's used is used and what isn't reverts, the budgets that in that bucket that we call strategic investment, which there's probably a better name for that, are things that remain available until fully used. So I can give you a bit more detail on that. For example, it includes about $500,000 in grant match funds. It includes $150,000 in things that would have come through FRPB and other internal grant award processes. $150,000 in program-based accreditation, not HLC institutional accreditation, but individual program, academic program accreditation. And I'm looking here, the remaining amount on faculty startup packages is about $170,000. So it's not a huge chunk of it. It's just one of the things that I think I tend to use that as an example because I think it tends to make sense. There's also about $600,000 in expenses that would be associated with reopening for the fall under the COVID-19 environment. Does that help give you a better sense of what the $2.5 million?
Thank you. Yep.
So Michelle, thank you. I think I'll make the kind of obvious observation that this kind of proposed budget gets us to an uncomfortably low reserve amount. And I think, you know, it's sort of unprecedented at times. And I think as we move, we have kind of a wide spectrum of outcomes, you know, as many people have noted, but kind of looking at after kind of this next fiscal year, kind of 2022 and beyond is really important because you have a wide variety of potential outcomes. So to the extent that we can be thinking, to Steve's point, to Janice's point, to the extent that we can be thinking about kind of how state funding may be, you know, may be kind of shaping up for fiscal 22 and beyond. You know, if we're going to slip into a recession, that's something really kind of important to think about and kind of plan on for the long term. So, you know, as we move into the fall, you know, I think we should be thinking about sort of not just, you know, what 2021 is going to be looking like on sort of a kind of crisis response budget, but also kind of 2022, given sort of how things are developing and beyond, because we are at sort of uncomfortably low levels of reserves right now.
I certainly agree. And you know, Mark and Andy and I and Katrina have had quite a few conversations about the importance of not just making budget cuts, but sort of planning for redesigning the university in a way that continues to serve students well and even improves how we support students through completion, but does things differently. And that's in the classroom, that's in the administrative areas, that's in student support. So yes, I agree with that.
So Maya, one of my great frustrations is all the good work that this university has done in the last 18 months. We would have put over $4.5 million into our reserves this spring if it wasn't for this pandemic. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, we even the fourth quarter and what happened to us, we're still able to put a couple $1 million into our reserves, although we're going to burn through that very quickly next year. I mean, I have hope that you know, some of this significant impact from the pandemic will ease. I don't know if it's going to take 2 years or 3 years. I'm optimistic that there'll be some rebound and stabilization of enrollment. But you're right. I mean, we have to plan for the future, and that's some of the work that we're doing and being aggressive in these reductions, and we have been for 18 months to get us, you know, on solid footing so that we can get back at, you know, focusing on, you know, the primary responsibility of educating our students. But you're right, we have to, you know, we talked about this a lot in cabinet. We spent the last several months just looking down and focusing on kind of this response to what's happening to us, but really to move into a recovery phase and looking beyond just next year, but what the next 3 to 5 years looks like. And we've actually done some modeling on that. We haven't shared it here, but we run models, a number of different scenarios on enrollment and what it may look like over the next 3 to 5 years and how that would impact our finances. So we have some preliminary models that we've been working on that kind of, you know, look out in the horizon 3 to 5 years.
So just to sort of pull all this together, the really important questions that we've been asking about, well, what does this mean? Table 4 on page 4 shows a projection of our total cash and our reserves at the end of fiscal year 21, given this provisional budget. The first 2 columns of that table I've already talked about. They were the actual year end for last year, June 30th, 2019, and our forecasted year end for this year, June 30th, 2020. What you'll notice is that the operating budget line basically stays the same, because what we're doing is any surplus or deficit in operations is running through the operating reserve. We're kind of keeping that operating cash flat. The capital projects, the balance at the end of June represents the committed projects that have not yet been completed. So at June 30th of this year, we have $4.1 million of capital projects that have not yet been completed. But then you can see on July 1st, we will add an additional $4 million to that capital project budget that would be based upon the projects in this provisional budget. So suddenly we're funding all of those projects up to $8.1 million, and then expecting to spend about $6 million of that over the course of the year. However, when we get to the capital projects page, we have identified $2 million of capital projects that we would not start on until we see where we are with the fall semester. So that is another place that we can go to, is to cancel $2 million projects. And that's a decision that could be made in when we come back to you with a revised budget. Looking down to the reserve section, we're ending this year with $8.3 million of operating reserves and $13.2 million of capital reserves. That's in the second column there. Then you can see on July 1st, the operating reserve stays the same, but the capital reserve goes down by the $4 million that is being transferred to fund the approved capital projects. And then over the course of the year, as we bring in capital fee revenues, those build that reserve back up. So looking ahead to a year from now, June 30th of 2021, cash balances totaling $37.3 million, 1.3 remaining in the operating reserve. And to your point, Maya, that is certainly a much thinner level than anybody would want to have in our operating reserve, but also having $13.9 million in our capital reserves as well at the end of the year. Any questions or comments before I move on to some discussion of tuition and fees?
Well, just another quick one. Is that cash level adequate to retain our credit rating?
I think that there are some concerns there. I mean, with Moody's, there's a wide variety of factors that they look at, including liquidity. The conversations that we've had with them in recent years have been about the management of our expenses. I think Moody's has done a good job of looking at sort of overall industry trends. When we spoke with Moody's, and I'm trying to think now, I guess it was late March or early April, they were very complimentary of seeing the real reduction in expenses that we've made, and they held our rating constant this spring, and in talking with them, much of that was because we had demonstrated that we were able to pivot and make expense reductions. So I think that yes, the liquidity is of some concern, but I think it's not only the liquidity that they're looking at, they're also looking at our ability to respond and adapt. Okay, the next page, there's a table that shows our tuition and fee rates relative to other institutions. The University of Northern Colorado is the fifth line down there. Our tuition and fees this year totaled just under $10,000 per year. And that is before any kind of institutional scholarship or discounting. That's the sticker price. And we really had been wrestling with the appropriate amount of tuition and fees for next year, as Andy said in his introductory remarks, recommending that we hold tuition flat, but make a $75 per year increases in fees, 55 of that to student activity fees and $20 to technology fees. That is not reflected in that table. So that $75 increase would take us to just a little bit over $10,000 a year in tuition and fees. None of those increases are included in the provisional budget. So should you approve that, that $75 fee increase would give us about $400,000 more revenue next year, which would reduce our reliance on reserves. We would not change our $10 million savings target, but it would help us contain about $400,000 of reserves. Any questions or comments or clarification on tuition and fees?
Steve? I just like to get your thoughts about that, if anything, and what you think we're doing is regarding tuition and fees, and happy to elaborate more. I know we'd had some discussions about this over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, one, on the tuition side, I do think we're smart to try to constrain it, because I have no doubt in my mind that we're going to get pushed on it in the next year and the year after in order to save the budget. So I think you got to try to ameliorate the impact on the students as much as you can. And I do think the fees that the technology fee, there's no question in my mind that if we're going to be entering a longer term environment in which we're going to be more reliant upon technology for delivering our courses, then I think we have to have a more robust system available and series of services for both faculty and students to avail themselves with to make that a successful teaching modality for us on a large scale. So I think an investment there, it makes a lot of sense. And then finally, Andy, I think what you're suggesting on the student side is consistent with what you've said to us all along. You want to increase support for students to get them to graduation. And my understanding is that's where you want to put these additional fees, is supporting students to get them to services to get them to graduation. And so that clearly is a priority. So I think to me, it's the right balance to be in right now. But I do think we're going to be very pressed next year and the year after that. If a recession does continue if we move towards a recession and the state is slow to rebound on state revenues, there's going to be some really tough decisions on how we're going to support the academic program in the out years. And it's tuition.
I've really struggled with this because I do believe that holding tuition flat is the right call. I know that $75 can be a lot of money for students, additional funds. So I really do struggle with the fee increase and our need to invest in our technology infrastructure and our support services. So it's something that I've been thinking about and talking about with a number of people, and really struggling with this slight fee increase. But I'd like to hear from others too, if you don't mind chiming in on the conversation. I think it's important that we have this.
And just one more quick item on the technology side. So I don't know, I suspect that if we were to look at student evaluations of this semester, the teaching evaluations, and there would be a reasonable number that would be pretty negative about the online experience. And I just think that's not to be critical. I mean, when you have to move so much from a face-to-face to an online in a matter of a couple of weeks, that's to be expected. But having said that, I think if we do believe that we're in a future where we're going to have to rely more on online, then we ought to be getting the resources necessary to assure that experience is a good experience for our students and it's a successful experience. So as difficult, I think, as it is to put that additional burden on students, I think it's for the right reasons. And that strategically, we have almost an obligation to be making some investments there if we truly believe that that's going to be a modality that we're going to have to rely on to a greater extent out into the future.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Andy, this is Christine. I appreciate Steve's perspective. And when you sent a note letting us know this might be the course that we have to go down, I don't think any of us are excited by raising fees, but I also think raising tuition is just not an option on the table this year. So if this is what we have to do in the interim, that's the right thing to do now. Not what any of us would have chosen though.
Can I put Malika on the spot for a student perspective, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely. So I appreciate you asking our perspective. I would agree with keeping tuition where it is, and I support your decision not to raise it. And I do support the increase in student fees, particularly the student activity fee and the technology fee. I think that's a reasonable justification that we can speak to students about in terms of UNC will have to be increasingly creative with how technology is delivered, with how the student experience is still brought to campus. And so I think that makes sense, even though, you know, the revenue lost from tuition is really unfortunate. I think it sends a really positive message to the students that their financial well-being is of importance to UNC, and you're doing the very best you can.
That's good.
Thank you.
Anything else on tuition and fees? Thank you for the thoughtful comments.
Question, just to clarify, and the technology fee increase, the student activity fee increase, is that earmarked towards technology and student services, or is that going to the general, like, how does that, does it go into general fund, or is that specifically to technology and student services?
Yep, that's a great question. The technology fee goes directly into technology services. Obviously, it doesn't fully cover all of our technology costs. We've got, you know, university-wide, there's about $13 million of technology costs. This covers certain things that are particularly related to students, and we track that so we know how it's being expended. So that increase would go into student technology. The student activity fee also covers a wide array of services, including our cultural and resource centers, clubs and organizations, student activities, you know, student events on campus and so on. And those are, you know, the student activity fee is comprehensive and it covers a wide array of services, but they are all about student support and activities. Okay. Really quickly, I'll mention table 7 on page 7. Andy certainly has asked us to start shifting away from the more centralized budget approach that we've been taking that we had taken in the past, and we are disaggregating our budget. I know there's a number of board members who also feel like it's helpful to understand some of the distinct pieces of our university, particularly auxiliaries. This is one step in that direction. This is showing you the components of that are included in the overall budget. So this is a supplement to table 3, but it shows you of our total $175.8 million of revenue, that 24 million of it is related to housing and dining, 8.9 is related to athletics, and 1.6 million is related to conferences and events. So again, this is a step in a direction of disaggregating our budget, and we intend to continue to do that, both in how we talk with the board about it and also in terms of how we model and allocate funds at the university. Okay, page 8 shows the capital budget for the year. The top section includes the projects that are rolling forward. I mentioned that we've eliminated $1 million worth of that, but these are the ones that we are continuing with. And then the bottom section articulates the things that we would be doing, including some chiller replacement, the work on the Toby Kendall dish machine room, and that's not just a dishwasher, it's the full room, and it's the trays, processing, and electric, and all of that kind of work. The replacement of turf fields at Butler Hancock, and the first total there of 1.9 million are the things that we would be working on over the summer. The second set of projects are things that we would not start on until fall and would depend upon where we are with our financial situation. But if things work out the way that we are anticipating, then these monies would be available for projects beginning in the fall. Below that are some restricted fund projects, renovating the swimming locker room. That's entirely from donor funds, and then state capital appropriations. And one of the big wins, and I'm glad to be able to sort of share this as we get to the end here, is that we will have money from the state for continuing fire sprinkler installation in Michener. And big news, the $3.8 million for the boiler. This is something that we've been asking for at least 5 years. And it is one of, I believe, only 2 projects from higher education that was approved. Andy and our contract lobbyist, Kayla, spent quite a bit of time with the Capital Development Committee members to help them understand that replacement of the boiler was a critical project. The CDC members came and visited our campus. We took them over and let them actually see the boiler. And so we are very pleased and relieved to have that money included in the state budget for next year. The last couple of pages just talk about the fact that we have been looking at other revenue scenarios and contingency plans, and they articulate some of the work that Andy already spoke to in terms of the task force that's working now and will be working through the end of July and probably into August as well. So with that, I would ask for approval. Page 10 summarizes the action. I'll also mention that I've got a second action item that relates to the state capital budget that I'll cover after this, but and I think, I'm not sure if Chairman Montfort is on right now or not, but I am looking for approval of the tuition and fee rates as we discussed and the provisional budget.
So we need a motion. I had to move rooms because our computer shop craps, but how about a motion?
So you want them separate or combined?
Dr. Jordan, I would recommend that this be combined, and then I have another item after this. So it's approval of the budget, including the tuition and fee rates.
Okay, so I'll approve, make a recommendation that we approve the tuition and fee rates for fiscal year or academic year 21 and the provisional operating budget, with the understanding that you will provide to us at the September board meeting an update on the tuition or on the enrollments that will, because you'll have already finalized your enrollments for the fall. So an update of that plus its impact for the budget and your plan for the $10 million that's built into the budget, but for which the reductions have not yet been identified.
I'll second that. This is Janice.
Any discussion, questions? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Then you have another one, Michelle?
I do. Continuing on, but beyond that, in behind tab C, we are actually now talking about the FY22 state capital budget submission. And so while there is little expectation of significant capital funding at the state level in FY22, we want to make sure that we are continuing to put forward the critical capital projects for the university. And you may notice and it's probably the second page of the document, that we actually have on there as our #1 priority, the boiler. At the time that we had to submit this to the state, which was at the end of May, there was not a final decision on the boiler being funded this year. And so we wanted to make sure that we had included it in the FY22 budget. So that's why it shows there. Our next priorities include a facilities master plan, Gray Hall mechanical system replacement, and then on the back side, Fraser Hall capital renewal. So these are things that would not come into play until the FY22 budget, but the state does require that we submit them this early in the process.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. This is Janice.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor, aye?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay. faculty promotion and tenure recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman Monfort. Just for the benefit of the new members of the Board of Trustees, quick overview of the process. One of the most important things we do at the university is hire new faculty colleagues and then provide professional development and growth. And that culminates in promotion and or tenure. The tenure process the promotion process is based upon criteria that the individual unit set, and faculty are evaluated against that unit criteria. For promotion to associate professor, faculty have to be evaluated as exceeding expectations in either teaching or professional activity and meeting expectations in the others. And for promotion to professor, faculty have to be evaluated as exceeding expectations in both teaching and professional activity. The process is a multi-layered process that begins with evaluation of faculty colleagues by the faculty of the unit. It then goes on, they make a recommendation. The chair or director of that unit then makes a recommendation. The dean of the academic college that houses that unit then makes a recommendation, and it comes to the provost academic affairs to make the final recommendation. Both the dean and the provost are evaluating primarily that the criteria by which the evaluations at the lower levels were conducted, that those criteria were followed in making the final recommendation. The table that follows the tab just gives you a list of the numbers of folks who were applying for promotion and or tenure to the different levels and the outcomes overall. And then in the following table, or the following pages, are a list of those faculty members who were promoted to the rank of professor, promoted to the rank of associate professor, who are being recommended for awarding of tenure. And then also there are a number of faculty who are on the non-tenure track, who are contract renewable, but who are also eligible for promotion in academic rank, but not for tenure. And so the recommendation is that those lists of folks who are given in the following pages, that they be recommended for promotion to the rank that they're listed at, as well as those who have applied for tenure, that they be awarded tenure. And that's the recommendation from Academic Affairs.
Okay, do we have a motion? Are you muted?
So moved.
Second?
Second, it's Maya.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Emeritus, is that both?
That was just tenure and promotion. Emeritus is the next, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for the approval on promotion and tenure. Emeritus faculty by Board of Policy are faculty members who have served the university for 10 or more years and are in good standing. This year we had 11 faculty who are recommended, who met that criteria, who are recommended for awarding of emeritus status. And those folks are listed following the tab. And so we're recommending that these faculty who have served the university with distinction for 10 or more years be awarded emeritus status.
Do we have a motion?
Recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Football.
Thank you. Yes, we have 2 head coach contracts for your consideration and approval today. The first is our new head football coach, Ed McCaffrey. Since probably you don't know very much about him and have never heard of him, I give you a little bit of a background. Coach McCaffrey comes to us from his coaching work at Valor Christian High School in Highlands Ranch, where he was the head coach for 2 seasons. During that period, He led the Valor Christian Eagles to a 24-2 winning record and the 5A state title in 2018, and then the team made it to the quarterfinals in 2019. All kidding aside, as you all know, he is a well-known player in the NFL. He played for 13 seasons with the Denver Broncos, San Francisco 49ers, and the New York Giants. He was on the Broncos Super Bowl 32 and 33 winning teams and Super Bowl 29 with San Francisco. After his retirement, Coach McCaffrey and his wife, Lisa, have put their efforts into the McCaffrey Family Foundation to assist children whose medical conditions have created academic or financial hardships. This is pursuant to Colorado statute, a university can have up to 6 multi-year contracts, and the board must provide approval for those contracts. We have 5. If you approve Coach McCaffrey's and Coach Smiley's contracts, we have 5 such. In addition to those 2 coaches, our volleyball coach, Lindsay Oates, and our women's basketball coach, Jenny Huth, are also multi-year contracts, and President Feinstein as well. So we're within the 6 limit for those. If Darren wants to add something to the information about Coach McCaffrey before I ask for a motion, Darren?
I don't have anything to add. I think you covered a good summary of both coaches. I think they're great people and the great representatives of UNC.
So we would need a motion to approve Coach McCaffrey's contract because the contract is necessary for the hiring of an employee in light of prevailing market conditions and competitive employment practices.
So Dan, I have a question on the incentives.
Yes.
So it provides $10,000 for winning the Big Sky Conference Championship. And then it provides $10,000 for a football championship subdivision playoff appearance.
Yes.
So if we win the Big Sky, we will automatically get a playoff appearance. But we could also get one of the 16 teams in the playoff appearance by not winning the Big Sky, but finishing high up in the rankings. So is it the intent that if we win the Big Sky, he automatically gets $20,000, or is it that it's either or?
It would be both, Dr. Jordan.
Okay.
So do you need a motion?
Yes, as I stated, we would need somebody to make the motion that I had just stated.
Unless Dr. Jordan has any other comments, I would move that forward.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Basketball coach.
Okay, next, Coach Smiley. Coach Smiley would become the 20th head coach in Northern Colorado men's basketball history if you approve his contract. He was immediately prior the basketball program's 4-year associate head coach, and notably, he's been the lead recruiter, compliance, and academic contact since his arrival. During the period of time that he's been the associate coach, the team's had an 80-50 record over those past 4 seasons. And as you know, the Bears won the 2018 collegeinsider.com tournament and had 3 straight 20-plus win seasons. Basically, Coach Smiley was the right-hand person to Coach Linder in turning the basketball program around. He's got a number of other major accomplishments before he came to be the Bears coach. He was an assistant coach at Weber State from 2014 to 2016. Before Weber State, he was the head coach and athletic director at Sheridan College, a national junior college powerhouse in Sheridan, Wyoming. Notably, in his 6 years at Sheridan College, the team posted a 153-43 overall record, and Coach Smiley led Sheridan to 4 North Subregion 9 titles and 2 runner-up finishes.
So we need a motion to approve that?
Yes, and with the same language that I talked about before, due to prevailing market conditions and to remain competitive.
This is Janice, so moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Questions?
Actually, Dick, this is Vicki. Quick question. Who seconded the football contract, please?
Janice.
Janice was made the motion, but I didn't see who seconded that.
Oh, I'm
Pratik. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Vicki. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now you got a couple board policy manual updates, our favorites.
Yes, I know you're looking forward to this, Dick.
Can you do all 3 of them? Can we get one motion for all 3?
We could, and I can just go through all of them, and we can do the 3 of them at the same time. That's true. So the first one is an update to the academic appeals procedure. These updates, you have both the old procedure and a new replaced procedure. This was a lot of work with various faculty Senate committees over a period of time. What is accomplished here is, I think, a lot greater clarity on how this procedure reads, and that particularly it makes clear that there are deadlines for various steps in the process, so that if certain actions aren't taken within a defined period of time, it moves through directly to the next step in the process. The other item is it allows for not a non-contractual period hearing, meaning under the old procedure, even if it got to the point where there was a hearing panel committee on a student's appeal, that we'd have to wait throughout the summer during faculty non-contractual periods to actually hold the hearing. Now there's a provision that if we can pull together the committee and get that done over the summer, we can, which is another thing that will certainly lessen the time period to go through the entire process, if that's what happens. Most times these issues are resolved before it gets to hearing, but if it does get to hearing, obviously we want to make the process as timely and as quick as we can. Those are the main changes in the policy. Yeah, are there any questions? Okay, moving along to the second one, which is the tenure clock provision. This is we've made some changes, just again, clarity of language, but the major change here was an addition of a so-called force majeure provision because of the pandemic. That also provides if the pandemic or some other force majeure event occurred that would require, because of the disruption, that the tenure clock be stopped and a faculty member be given more time to complete their work towards tenure, that pandemic and other acts of God and impossibility issues is included in those items for which a faculty member could request an extension of the tenure clock. Stan, I don't know whether you or Fritz have any comments.
Dan, I think you summarized it. The old policy never contemplated a situation of pandemics disrupting the ability of faculty members to do their research. And so this policy does allow for a faculty member to, in essence, petition for a tenure clock extension if he or she can show that the situation at hand does in fact materially delay their ability to meet the criteria set forth for tenure.
Are
And
there
did
any
the
other?
policy automatically extend to cover last academic year for faculty, since we're not approving it until now?
It would, Sam, go ahead.
No.
No, I think it's important to know. My assumption is that's what the intent is, but I want to make sure that we do the mechanics correctly. Because normally when you adopt a policy, it's prospective in its implementation, not retrospective.
Right. If I'm, Dr. Jordan, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if a faculty member at this point availed themselves of the pandemic request for extension,
right,
it would apply retrospectively.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Are there any other
I want to
questions
think about
on
the
that?
next pandemic, to be frank with you at this point.
I'm sorry, Andy. I at least I didn't hear you.
I was saying that we're focusing on this pandemic. I'm not focusing on another one at this point.
No, I agree with that. And my question was really because typically when we adopt policies, the policy is effective the date you apply it, and it's prospective in how it's implemented.
Right.
It doesn't typically reach back to before when the policy was adopted. And that's why I just want to make sure that this one clearly reaches back to cover.
In my view, it does.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on the tenure clock policy? Okay, that brings us to the last one, which is our new student code of conduct. Andy has approved the new student code, which would be in the university regulations, not in the board policy. And our request is that the new student code of conduct take effect August 1st of this year. A couple of reasons for that. And the primary one really is with Clery reporting. That is on a cycle where it would ease the Clery reporting burden if we made this in effect on August 1st rather than immediately. It would really make the Clery reporting issue much more difficult. If the board is let me start over. With the approval of the new student code of conduct, the sections of the board policy 21501 through 504 are no longer needed because they would be surplusage, and that would remove the old code of conduct language on which our present student code of conduct is based. So what I'm requesting is approval of a motion to remove the 21501 through 504 effective August 1, and those provisions would be replaced by the new student code of conduct that would be found in the university regulations. As those of you who have been on the board for a while recall, when we implemented back, I believe it was in 2014 or 2015, the new discrimination complaint procedures, those had previously been found in the board policy manual. We removed what was in the board policy manual and replaced them with the discrimination complaint procedures found in university regulations. There are a couple of, the main reason for moving it into the regulations is sometimes there are changes, like I'm sure many of you have heard, there are upcoming changes on the requirements for hearings and sexual harassment allegations under what would be our DCP, and we can make those changes if necessary through presidential approval so that we make sure we are compliant with the law. This new student code of conduct is the result of a lot of good work by the Dean of Students Office, Housing and Residential Education, and then of course it went to Faculty Senate for their review and their recommendation of approval of the new Student Code of Conduct. Are there any questions about the new Student Code of Conduct or the request to remove the provisions that I talked about in the Board Policy Manual?
So can we get a motion to approve all three of those?
We can. Yep.
Move to approve all three.
Second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that concludes the meeting. I don't think we have any reason for an executive session, do we, Dan?
Nope, we do not.
Appreciate everybody's time and enjoy your summer.
Thank you all. Stay
Thank you.
well.
Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time. Appreciate all of you. Take care.
Bye now.